He also said that every generation needs a revolution, Jimmy. The American dream is just that. Just a dream.
War is a continuation of politics, only by other means. Politics is a continuation of economics by other means. This is our bank. This is our war. And this is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio! The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Ascension Center on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And I am your host, Janet Lessin, with my co-host, Theresa J. Morris. Our producer is Thomas Becker. We're trying to get Theresa on right now. We go through this. We're having Skype problems. But while we're waiting for Theresa, I'll tell you a little bit more about our special guest, Ira S. Pastor. And he's the Chief Executive Officer of BioQuark Inc., bioquark.com. With over 30 years of experience across multiple sectors of the pharmaceutical industry, including pharmaceutical commercialization, biotech drug development, managed care distribution, OTC, and retail, he's served as a VP Business Development for drug development company Biotechnology, Inc. He raised $40 million of private equity, consummating over $50 million of licensing deals and bringing lead drug candidate from the discovery phase, the stage to phase 3 development. He was employed by SmithKline Beecham Pharmaceuticals, working in sales, etc., etc. He's a very knowledgeable and diverse individual. You can see his full bio on aquarianradio.com. I'm going to get to what really interests me. So while I worked in the regenerative medicine side of the biotechnology industry, and for the last few years have been involved in the dynamics of central nervous system regeneration, studying both human and non-human species, we find audiences are quite interested in the themes and deeper questions as to the as of yet unexplainable topics related to the human mind, consciousness, memories that have emerged over the years, but for the most part have been ignored or conveniently forgotten. So we're going to be talking about 25 strategies for living longer. Let's see, synthetic biology, diabetes, and induced pancreatic regeneration repair. Research from the ongoing anti-aging longevity. Research with their partners in Russia and the Eurasian region. We're talking about harnessing nature for regeneration, disease reversion and rejuvenation, and how organisms can lose or regrow a brain and they can sustain memories from before the event, and how we as humans hold on to extensive amounts of information from our earliest childhood. And despite the general brain turnover, remodeling that recurs in the human lifetime, it is estimated that hundreds of thousands of brain cells die each day in the normal brain, and the biochemical milieu within each neuron is renewed thousands of times in lifetime. Anyway, we're going to be talking about life after death and where the soul, here it is. Where does the soul go after death? And where does it side following the death of the human brain. So this and much more can be discussed today, and I'm not sure exactly where we'll go, but I recommend you go over to aquarianradio.com. There's pictures and there's a bunch of links to about a dozen articles. You can go have fun for a long time and learn a lot. We're going to learn a lot today. So TJ Morris, are you there? Theresa?
Theresa J. Morris is reporting to planet Earth, the being that I've died a couple of times in this lifetime. I'm happy to be here because I know where I was when I was dead, so I'm excited to hear another human's point of view. Thank you for letting me be part of the Ascension Center, our show here with the great Mike Ringley, and is a Mad Painter, our producer here. He must be, because I wouldn't be here.
I see him. Yeah, Matt, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay,
awesome.
Good. Okay.
Let's hear this person. He's a humanoid, I take it.
And he is, I think so. He could be a robot.
No, just a regular human.
Ira S.
And he has a
welcome to our show. Oh, yeah.
Thanks for having me. Hello, everybody.
Oh, we're glad you're here. Very glad you're here. So tell us, where do you want to begin? Because there are, you just sent me all kinds of information. I was very excited I put your page up today and I went, wow, look at all the directions we can go. But we're going to follow you. We're going to let you talk. And then at a certain point, we're going to raise our hands, even though you can't see it, and say, I have a question. But go ahead. Take it away, Ira. Who are you?
Yeah. So who am I? I am by undergraduate training, I am a pharmacist who went to business school and then spent the last 30 plus years in some facet, as you mentioned, of the pharmaceutical industry, or the more traditional pharmaceutical industry as people think about it, from big pharma sales, marketing, business development, on through the biotech research chain, and into some other ancillary areas of distribution and retail and managed care. So it's sort of the place I grew up and where I was trained for the last couple decades as a generalist. While it was a very dynamic place to be and exciting, and obviously it generates a tremendous amount of wealth every year. I think the number is around $1 trillion annually that we spend on drugs around the world nowadays. Over time, I became more and more dismayed by the fact that despite those financial dynamics, and spending an additional $200 billion every year on R&D, we weren't able to cure a damn thing. we were very good at creating treatments for stuff, and increasing, quality of life in terms of what I'll call the outputs of disease in terms of symptoms. But when it came to the big things that are responsible for human degeneration, suffering, and our ultimate death, we were batting zero. And you can start at Alzheimer's through cancer, diabetes, on down the road. We don't have any cures for any of the chronic diseases responsible for these problems. And so, I wanted to do something a little different this time around with my, this part of my career. I had always had, and they train you still to this day as a pharmacist. Then they still give you a couple semesters, at least in the U.S., of sort of natural products and medicinal botany and so forth. I always had a major appreciation for sort of the natural world and some of what it has to teach us. Most people don't realize that even today, in 2017, the majority of all drugs, biologics, and consumer products that we consume had their origins from nature, primarily from the plant, fungi, or bacteria kingdoms. However, the really smart people out there will tell you that when it comes to nature, we've only scratched the surface. And we currently live on this wonderful planet, and though we see ourselves as this top of this food chain, there are many other organisms out there that, from a health and wellness perspective, are just much further advanced than we are as human beings. Obviously, there are many lower organisms, and obviously the audience is familiar with the capabilities, probably the amphibian kingdom, newts, salamanders, what have you, that can replace lost or damaged organs and tissues that are identical in both structure and function to the original ones, capable of effortlessly regenerating a wide range of tissues, including spinal cords and limbs and hearts and eyeballs and even large segments of their brains. What is less well known is that these same species, the regenerators, also have fascinating skills for repairing and reversing cellular and genetic damage when it happens. And I like to point to the case, and this is, we've known about this for decades now, but, cancer, as an example, occurs everywhere in nature, but in the regenerative kingdom, you don't find it killing as it does us. And what you do find is that many organisms that are regenerating or are substantial regenerators like to take tumors and just change them and turn them back into normal, healthy tissues. A lot different approach than we take as humans. Now, obviously, at the far end of the spectrum, you have organisms on this planet that do not age and exhibit so-called negligible senescence. You have some organisms on this planet that age backwards and turn themselves back into a youthful state later on in life. And then you have some rare instances of organisms that actually can die and be reborn. Needless to say, when it comes to humans, we are extremely weak when it comes to doing any of this. We're very good at laying down scar tissue when we're damaged in some fashion, but we do have some DNA repair capabilities. But at the end of the day, these capabilities are diminished substantially over time. And so, what we set out to do this time around was basically ask the question of how can we tap in and mimic some of these capabilities that evolution and nature have put before us and have been tweaking and modifying and enhancing for the last couple billion years, and take these and create opportunities that go beyond sort of what the pharmaceutical and healthcare business currently provides as the state of the art. And that is sort of the background to how we got to where we are today. As mentioned, as exciting as regenerative medicine is and all the potential, it's really the tip of an iceberg to not just understanding and potentially addressing some of the most dreaded problems in terms of health and disease as humans are concerned, but also allow us to probe some very unique questions related to what it means to be human, what it means to be alive, what it means to think and be conscious, and what the mind means. And these are all interesting topics that we can delve into tonight. But there's
wonderful.
Would you like me to keep going, or would you? I don't know if you want to.
Yeah. I can ask a question, but I like what you said. You're going to talk about what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be alive? We're going to put a lot of questions out there and see what we can do to answer them. Your research kind of reminds me a little bit of Dr. Aubrey de Grey. Do you know who Dr. de Grey is?
Sure, I know Aubrey.
Okay. Have you presented at his, or have you worked with his organization?
No. Needless to say, a lot of us that work in the area of aging and longevity run in similar circles. And while there is sort of a common consensus to what aging is, there are still, major, I would say, trenches that, with regard to sort of what the ultimate approach is on how one deals with it. And Aubrey has definitely done a wonderful job of sort of increasing awareness of the problem, and has sort of staked his translational strategy on the damage component of the sort of metabolism, damage, and pathology continuum. We are, as an organization, going in a slightly different direction. While we understand that pathology is downstream and has been the focus of the pharmaceutical industry, while the damage that comes important is definitely important, there is a major basket of events in terms of the upstream that we can't just overlook. And I know Aubrey's position in the sense that, well, the upstream is very complicated. You don't want to mess around there. But many members of the natural world have, answers for us. And so while it is, metabolism and the causes of disease, sort of the underlying abnormalities and biologic factors that precede disease and aging are complex, we feel if you look in the right direction and ask the right questions to the members of this biologic world that have solutions, that it's not that big a problem. So we applaud, everyone, there's a lot of different strategies out there. We applaud everyone that are, coming at it from different angles. We just feel that the real place and the real action for disease, aging, and, even sort of the concepts that we're focusing on with regard to the central nervous system and the death of the central nervous system are going to be found not in the outputs, but in the inputs, or what's upstream. So, but nonetheless, we do applaud what Aubrey's trying to do.
Right. I haven't talked to him in years, but I found his work. I'm interested in longevity and even the concept and the idea of almost physical immortality. Here in the Ascension Center on Revolution Radio, we often talk about things outside of the box, like other species on other planets, and what's going on with human beings. Have they been dropped here? Or they been chemically or DNA altered because we don't seem like we're really designed to live here very long. We have to hide from the sun, all kinds of things. You think about it, right? So I'd like to first of all, TJ's input too. Her daughter is struggling with cancer. Maybe let's focus on some of the things that have affected us personally, if that would work for you. And so do you want to talk a little bit about what you've been going through with your daughter and going into this this center in Tampa, and how she made it through phase 1, but now she's back in the struggle? What can be done with people that, went into remission and now they're back, and each time they come back with the cancer comes back, they have less of a chance of surviving? What are you guys doing for stuff like that?
Yeah, well, so I mean that's it's a great place to discuss, and it actually from the perspective of we talk a lot about the sort of the state of affairs in biosciences nowadays, this sort of reductionist approach to addressing diseases that we've been in for the last century, where we like drilling down a lot to genes and proteins and other targets, where we get this situation of necessary yet not sufficient. So in other words, yes, genes are important carriers of information, yet they cannot describe the higher level function or structure of an organ or a tumor in this particular case. Same thing goes for neurons in the central nervous system. We'll talk about that a little later on. But yes, so if we look at cancer, here's the current situation. We spend trillions of dollars since the war on cancer started decades ago. Yet, it remains one of humanity's major killers. Leading cause of morbidity and mortality, 14 million cases each year, diagnosed, 8 million deaths. There are the obvious problems with the existing strategies, as you mentioned, fractional cell killing, rapid resistance, and these plague both the older approaches in terms of chemo and radiation, as well as they do the newer ones. And this is one of the problems, as exciting as some of these new smart drugs and immunotherapies are, when you create something that is highly targeted versus shotgun, you still run the risk of doing a great job of eliminating certain types of cells but leaving others behind. And this has been sort of a major you begin to see some of the transition in the way people are talking nowadays in the industry, not as much as I would like, but we have for decades followed two rules in the development of sort of this kill-centric methodology that basically says, tumors are homogeneous, which means they're all made up of the same cell type, and they are only responsible, the only thing responsible for them are somatic mutations in various control or proliferation centers of the genome. And these two beliefs, although they have maintained their sort of status as sort of two major pillars of the oncology system, have day after day become more and more irrelevant. How do we know this? We know this because the industry and the literature is full of examples where the somatic mutation theory of cancer doesn't apply. The somatic mutation of theory of cancer does not explain spontaneous remissions, of which there's thousands in the literature mentioned. It doesn't explain the dynamic of foreign body tumor formation. It doesn't explain the hundreds of papers out there which shows that tumor cells can normalize completely, or normal cells can become malignant when placed in different environments. And lastly, and this is a little more scientific, but I'll drill down on it. There is a major imbalance between the mutation data that we have and ultimately the tumors we see. And you have these weird situations where you have, one tumor type with dozens of different mutations that lead to it, and the reverse, one single type of mutation that leads to many different types of cancer. All of this knowledge that is emerging now is basically saying whether we take a shotgun approach or whether we take a silver bullet approach to cancer, we are heading down the same problematic pathway. If we ignore the fact that tumors are mixtures or heterogenic baskets of cells, no matter how good you get at killing something, there's always something left behind. And this, although we see a growing research base that's beginning to challenge this, it's still the major methodology and concept. So we are looking to continue to sort of add to the discussion to transition the cell-based concept of cancer to more of a tissue-based one, the one that looks at tumors and cancer, what they are, they're developmental problems. They're not cell problems. They're tissue level. And once again, if we look at nature and we see how the most cancer resilient organisms out there deal with cancer, it's not about killing, it's about changing. And it's there in the literature. It's been known for decades, going back to the 1940s. And you have these crazy papers that you run into about these experiments when we were first testing carcinogens in the lab back in the 1930s and 1940s. And you have these bizarre experiments where, you gave some nasty carcinogen to some guinea pigs and all the guinea pigs got cancer and died. And then you gave it to the rats and the rats got cancer and died. And then you gave it to the frogs and the frogs got cancer. And then 2 weeks later, they were cancer free. And we didn't think about it much 80 years ago because we really didn't understand what was going on in terms of the regenerative dynamics and how regeneration can lead into tissue remodeling and normalization, genetic correction of cells and tissues. But now in 2017, we're beginning to say, okay, a lot of this old data now makes sense, and we want to remarry it to the current structure and basically come up with therapeutics, come up with interventions that, no, it's not about killing. It's not about blasting stuff away. If you had Alzheimer's, you're not going to cut out your brain. If you had diabetes, you don't cut out your pancreas. There may be a totally different approach here that's much more holistic, that doesn't deal with all of the downsides of the fractional killing and resistance, and may take us into sort of a new era in regard to really how we think of this really dreaded disease that is just, unfortunately, still a major killer.
TJ, are you there?
Yes,
hello?
I was on mute. Hello, can you hear me? I was on mute.
Cool. What would you like to say?
Well, in regards to what you told about my daughter, she only has 6% now, but because she doesn't have 5% or less, she had a clean bill of health when I went down and stayed with her 4 months during that trial. But now, since they can't go back and put her, it's in her bone. They say it's in the gene, like he said, the T cells. So they had killed T13 or something like that. Remember, I've talked to you about the warmonger gene we bring to the planet, so to speak. And for, eons, we had gotten rid of it, and now we've brought it back to the planet. So she agreed, being this daughter of mine, to take on this cancer story, as did my husband, right? We gave them the how to kill cancer. We gave it to them back in the day, when I was Ariel. But they wouldn't accept it because they wouldn't. I guess we had too much reality tied up in it. So anyway, in this 3D reality, she's decided to go through this. So she's going to enter another trial this time, and we'll see how that goes. So if they want to get rid of the cell again. So, we're debating. It's all experimental, and she was willing to do it. Tom got fed up with the people here and left. And I talked to her today, and she's going to go down back to Moffitt and with American Cancer and Moffitt and the politics and the people in Langley and the researchers, and we're going to go give it another go. So I don't know what to tell you because it's all a game. Our avatar's only so long. So don't know what to say, really, except that it'd be nice for people to want to live longer every time we come here. Don't know what to say, Janet.
Well, do you have any questions for Ira?
I don't know what they would be about, except you and I were all excited because last week we talked about you pulled up the 25 ways to live longer. If you want to go through a few things, if people want to listen and do the work, maybe, Ira, it's up to you. I mean, whatever you think you're here to do.
What can we do? What are some doable steps that we can teach our listeners and help them improve their lives and make their lives happier based on what you're learning, what other people are learning about diseases, death, dying, aging? What are some practical things that we can give everybody?
Yeah,
Back
so
to you, Ira.
sure. So there's some suggestions that are related to some of the things that we've been learning the last several years in terms of sort of actionable clues. One of the main things when people ask about eating and drinking and diet, things like obviously everyone knows the basics. Don't smoke, exercise, try to eat well, and so forth. One thing I like to say is try to do these things based on an understanding of where our place as humans is in nature in this world. You have to keep in mind that while we are human and we possess a human genome, this genome did not fall out of the sky yesterday. It contains the evolutionary past of all the species that came before us. And every disease that is responsible for the degeneration and death of us, had some particular property in the past that benefited another species. As example, high blood sugar levels, which in us, seen in diabetes and other endocrine disorders, are required by many fast sprinting animals that want to run away from a prey or being pursued as a predator. Various forms of inflammation, which manifest in humans in a variety of inflammatory, osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, allergic responses, are many organisms' only form of infectious disease defense. And, one of the fascinating things along this line is even cancer, due to the fact that many of the genes that are active in human tumors are found in single-cell organisms, which were on this planet 1 billion plus years ago, and are used when they like to get together in multi-cell colonies and things like that, actually point to the fact that cancer, strangely enough, may have been one of the things responsible for our emergence, billions, a couple billion years. So it's very important to understand the differences between us and other organisms and adjust and live appropriately. Secondly, I'm a very big proponent of natural products. As mentioned, plants and fungi and bacteria still form the basis for many of the pharmaceuticals and biologics and consumer healthcare products that are out there. However, we see new disciplines coming along. We hear a lot about the microbiome and the virome, and things like interkingdom signaling, which is the ability of one species and its signals, its actual live signals, to affect the genome of another. You see even living organisms being developed as therapeutics nowadays, from leeches to maggot therapy to worm therapy for inflammatory bowel disease. So I think it's very important that we respect nature and we continually learn about how we can incorporate some of these interventions in our daily routine. Thirdly, I'd like to say, as much as possible, we need to avoid the single magic bullet approach to dealing with our daily health and wellness. Although the pharmaceutical industry loves to create so-called single magic bullets, most of the species that are around us today, whether it's plants or invertebrates or amphibians or what have you, have survived for hundreds of millions of years on this planet, far before us, without any of those pharmaceutical products. They deal with things differently. As an example, they can't take an antibiotic like we do. Plants, as an example, they die of the same things we die of, but when they deal with infection, they deal not just with a single antibiotic. They make libraries, they make combinations of substances to protect themselves. That's why plants have been here for over 1 billion years. So we have to think outside of sort of the single magic bullet approach in our daily routines. And lastly, just a note, I like to say, it's very important to get out in nature. and at the same time be good to it. Because most of the species that possess extended life and health spans, whether that's 500 years or 1,000 years, either due to one of two things. They exploit very little from nature, or they give back to it, whether that's trees cleaning the air and the water and producing oxygen. The living system around us understands this. The biosphere understands this. We don't understand it too well, and it's sort of one of the evolutionary connections to why, in our opinion, we are given sort of those 70 plus years as as a limit nowadays, but why many others have evolution has granted them substantially longer time than us. So those are just a few tips.
Let's look at that. That's very interesting. So I have a 77-year-old husband, and I love him. So I once saw a show, every day I wake up, I have higher and higher odds of not making it to bed that night, dropping over. The older we get, what are our odds of making it to the end of the day? How does that work?
Well,
is there anything we can do about it? So you're saying get outside. I saw in your 25 things jump. To jump.
Yeah,
that was part of it, jumping.
There's definitely something to be said for. I say stress. There's definitely something to be said for what is referred to as sort of the hormetic dynamic. The fact that just like the weightlifter who lifts weights, that lifts 100 pounds, and stresses the body, will be able to lift 105 pounds the next time they're at the gym. There's definitely something to be said about not overly washing and purifying our hands with alcohol 100 times a day. There is a reason we do not live in isolation. We are a part of this biologic mosaic of organisms and species on this planet that is much bigger than just us. And so we need to understand that our reason, our vitality and our ability to go from day to day as time goes on, and which time tells us that over time we are diminishing in our robustness as we age, can in many ways be countered by accepting those stresses and bringing them in some sense into our lives. That doesn't mean stressing yourself by smoking or doing activities that are clearly bad for you. But at the same point, we are meant to move. We are meant to investigate and adventure. It's all part of sort of our essence. And I think there's a reason we feel that way. You get out and you're in nature and you actually feel good. That's what I do. I feel good when I'm at the beach. I feel good when I'm in the woods. There's something about sort of the heartbeat of this planet that calls to me. And I think this may be the case for most people. But I think too often, what's the expression? You don't get old. You don't stop playing because you get old. You get old because you stop playing. And I think this is really important in really thinking about, doing things, getting involved and staying active, even after retirement, using the brain, just being involved in the world and the biosphere and the integrated system that we find ourselves in. Because once we separate from it, once we disengage, that's cancer. That's what the cancer cell wants to do when it metastasizes. There's parallels here, and so we really have to think not as this isolated organism, but that we're part of this mosaic of nature.
So that's what my husband does. He's 77. People think he's in his 50s. He's like Peter Pan. He gets out every day. We're living in Maui, Hawaii. He rides his bike up and down this hill. He goes halfway across the island and back, and he's just excessive, it seems, at some level, yet he's got the magic formula, and he'll probably outlive us all. What can you do to be one of those few people that lived to 100 or past the 100? And what's the oldest that anybody's ever lived that we're counting in our traditional system? There's stories, people in the hills of Russia that would be over 200, people in India that 500, whatever. What do you do with those stories? Do you count them, or you just throw them out like, oh, that's just a myth?
Well, they're, they fall into a category of super centenarians. So anyone that's, I think it classifies anyone over 110, actually. Longest lived was Madame Jeanne Clément from France. She lived almost to her 123rd birthday. Clearly let's just say an outlier. She smoked until she was 100. I forget how much chocolate she ate every day. But clearly, there are genetic and epigenetic components to this. I think, and there are groups that do this. There are groups that go out and sort of study these supercentenarians and take their blood and study if there's differences in certain genes that are expressed and so forth. I think it's an interesting scientific exercise. The problem is, there's very few of these supercentenarians in the world. There's very few, 115-year-old people that you can track down and do a lot of study on. So, unfortunately, I think they are the outliers, and I think at best they point to the fact that, hey, with the right combination of genetics and epigenetics and other intangible factors at this point, yes, here is sort of the current limit to the puzzle. But to go beyond that, or at least to transition from a state of the average, which is about 8 decades or so, to basically move the whole curve in that direction, will require advanced technologies. I don't think exercise and vitamins and clean living will get you all the way there. It'll get you some way, but you still are contending with the entire sort of force of evolution that majority of us have been granted with, that says, that has basically said, that the bristlecone pine tree will live for 5,000 years, and such tortoise will live for 250, and such clam will live for 500, and humans, from a straight evolutionary perspective, have been given this, 70 to 80 years on average. I'm a very big proponent, and I believe that the tools of regenerative medicine will help us get there. But it's not, as Madame Jeanne Clément shows, no, you probably shouldn't try to smoke however many packs and see if you can get to 100. I don't think that strategy will work for most people.
That doesn't work, yeah. Okay, TJ or Matt, do you have any questions for Ira or comments?
Matt, you do? I was wondering, you talked about the cancer quite a lot, I guess, because of Janet bringing up my daughter, for example. But, as a human, I have no answer as her mother because she acquired it. And this has been proven by several cancer doctors that they specialize in cancer. She's had treatment through Sacred Heart and then gone on to Moffitt Cancer Center, one of the 5 best. But they told her that having her son's cells put in, 50% was equal to hers. And she did that. So she was able to have the bone marrow transplant. And they came back out of 2 or 3 of the bone marrow when they pull a piece out of her hip that she was fine. And now she had it done May, her new birthday, because they call it the killing, as you mentioned. So she had a new birthday May 23rd. But only this Tuesday, they gave her a clean bill of health basically because they weren't finding it. And then all of a sudden this Tuesday, just recently, she was told it's back by the same doctor she had, and it's 6% in her bones. like a sponge. The best way to say it is they cleaned her out like a sponge, but they couldn't get all of it. So some of the 6% of her own cells were left, although most of her is now her son. And of course, she's got some of her hair's growing back in, a little different color, but her body changed. Now she has her son's genes, and she's heavier set now. They're calling her compact because before she was very thin. And she's gained an extra 50 pounds. She looks great. But the fact is she went back to that place where she cried and she knew she was terminal. But is there anything you can say that you know? Because, it's a gene, but it was acquired from benzene poisoning as a painter. She's a master painter with 20 years into it. But she wants to live. Unlike some people, it's not. And they said this isn't in her genes. Can you give any information, knowing what you know now, on cancer?
Yeah, there's this balance, and I familiar with many in sort of the oncology system that argue from both sides whether the gene is more important than the stimulation. We all have the same genes. Whether they are activated and how they're expressed, the volume that we turn that knob up, whether it's the benzene or whether it's some other pollutant, these are what we'll say are the epigenetic stimuli that say, okay, gene X, while I don't have cancer for the first 40 years of my life, all of a sudden starts churning out and doing its bad thing. There is the balance, and I don't think the system currently has an answer to sort of what comes first, the chicken or the egg. The important thing that I want to mention that your daughter's doing, which it's sad, but a very small percent of people take advantage of clinical studies. The current estimate of those 14 million diagnoses that occur each year is that less than 5% in cancer, this is I'm talking about all of the diseases, but specifically in terms of cancer, less than 5% of any patients ever seek out an available clinical study, let alone a so-called expanded access study, so one that a pharmaceutical company may be already undertaking that you want to get into. So there's two different degrees of clinical studies that people can. I think too many people are afraid of the fact that it's something's untested or they may get a placebo. Although in terms of cancer, they typically don't do placebo studies anymore. It is very important, and there's great government resources in terms of clinicaltrials.gov and so forth that outline the hundreds of studies that are going on here and around the world that patients should really seek out, because yes, there is a very short set of options in terms of in terms of surgery, radiation, and chemo as they which have existed for the last 100 years. So it is very important that we call these clinical trial gaps that exist, and they're not just in cancer; it's everywhere. It's on all these diseases. People just don't think of themselves for one reason or another. They don't want to be a guinea pig, and I understand that. But at the same time, I make the analogy that most drugs, even the ones that are on the market, are really you're still a guinea pig. Unless you're talking about something that's been around for 100 years, whether that's aspirin or penicillin or something like that, because we don't know as a system how any one particular drug is going to affect you. We know it in the specific population of 500 people that we studied in that trial to get approval, but how it's going to affect 300 million people in the United States, we don't know those data. So it is very important to sort of look seriously at sort of the structure and the understanding of what the clinical trial system is all about, and sort of not to give up hope just because the existing offerings that are on the market have not worked. And so I think it's a good thing that your daughter is doing. And yeah, once again, the balance between genetics and external or epigenetic responsibility for cancer is still a chicken or the egg comment. We, as I said early on, we care less about that. We're not interested in. We just want to revert the entire system, or we want to correct it and turn the cell back into a normal cell and erase any damage. But yeah, so that's sort of where we are in the current status of our understanding in 2017.
Matt, do you have any questions?
Well, what's the best course? Is it best to stay away from modern medicine?
It's funny. I've been in the pharmaceutical industry 30 plus years. I have slightly elevated blood pressure. I take an ACE inhibitor product. I prefer never to take a drug any one day for the rest of my life. Here's the problem. And I'm not trying. I have a lot of friends that still work in the industry. I enjoyed working for a period of time in that business. But at the end of the day, every drug is an experiment. Everyone's disease is a rare disease. We don't know. And that is why you have these bizarre situations where you have this billion-dollar drug eventually gets to market, and a couple of years later, what do you see? You see people's livers shriveling up or their kidneys failing. And so I say, well, why didn't we see that? We studied 5,000 patients. We worked on this thing for 15 years. You never see those problems. You can never see those problems because they don't show up in the clinical development process. We've gotten pretty good at getting rid of acute toxicity of products. We've gotten pretty good at getting rid of birth defects. But when it comes to the major issue, which is the long-term toxicity, we never have answers for those problems. And that's why if you sort of look at ever since thalidomide and some of the events that caused the formation of sort of the FDA as it exists today, of how many products have been pulled off the market in this country alone that were on the market for a long period of time and then pulled off much later, it's staggering. There's the reverse situation, which is even more strange, the fact that many of the most popular and useful products that are out there today, I'll say penicillin and aspirin as two examples, wouldn't go to the market today. Penicillin kills guinea pigs by the thousands. It produces terrible birth defects in rats. Aspirin kills cats. And then, we cure cancer thousands of times a year in mice. But it's all about translation. It's about understanding the organism. And this is one thing we've done very poorly as a system. We're not rats. We're not guinea pigs. We're not rabbits. We're humans, and we're the human system. And so there's going to have to be new ways of studying and really developing these therapies in the future, because the old model hasn't. It's done, as I said at the beginning, it's done pretty good at giving us some treatments and dealing with symptoms, but the bigger questions are still out there.
Wow. Well, we're coming up on the first break. Is there anything you want to tell us before we go to the break, and then we'll come back and go into some more?
No, I have a lot more exciting things to talk about. So. Yeah.
Well, what would you like to cover in the second half?
Let's talk about the central nervous system. Let's talk about death.
Okay.
An exciting topic, but
that sounds great.
What have you learned about death?
Yeah, I broke my back and my neck, and I've got cadaver bones in my neck, and so I'm considered sort of a cyborg. So I've died a couple of times, too. So if you want to help me on my nervous system, because I know that it's important, I can't stay in this avatar, this meat suit, very long. But I've come back. I look a lot younger than I did last year. So I'm doing the best I can. So we can come back and talk about death and dying, and why am I still here after all these deaths? That'll be fun.
Let's do it.
Sounds
all right.
Good. Okay. So we have another 30 seconds before this music comes on.
Yeah, they ain't got much time. Time's running.
It'll be a few minutes. All right. Well, folks, we shall. We'll talk about our body, and stay in here if you want to. Giving up the ghost. What is the ghost? What is this? We're walking around in these meat suits. Oh, I'd love that. Yeah, I've been several places. I totally believe in interdimensions, but that's my own philosophy or theosophy or belief system. And hope is important, folks. You're only here and then you're gone. Where's our parents go? Where's my mommy? Where's my daddy? Where's my husband? The little kid in you wants to know. So we'll talk about that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, we're still waiting for the
break. It's coming. And you'll have to mute during the break because I can't drop it with you on the phone.
Okay, I'm on mute right now.
We will be muting. We're just waiting for the music.
I want to remind everybody we are totally listener supported, so if you got a buck or two, bring it on down to us.
There you go. Put in.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Did you ever feel that things were not quite right? That everything was just ever so slightly askew?
Do you have, to paraphrase Morpheus, a splinter in your mind?
If you're interested in hearing the latest information about UFOs, the paranormal,
ancient cultures and structures,
monatomic elements,
longevity,
fantastic discoveries in science,
download it to your brain,
then tune into us. Hi, I'm Dave.
And I'm Mackie.
And we are Shiny Side Out, Sundays 2 to 4 a.m. Eastern. See you then.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Join me weekdays for my new show, Tell Chris Joe. It's going to be a problem show brought to you live from Kensington. Thursdays, I'm dealing with hot topics, heated debate, what's new around the world, and ring-ins to discuss listeners' problems and offering considered and heartfelt solutions. So join me, Chris Hart, for Tell Chris Joe. Stop what you're doing, grab a cup of tea, and coming live from Kensington. Relax, let me entertain you with a coffee bar online. Listeners' very personal problems. So that's Thursdays, 2 p.m. in the afternoon, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. See you there. It's going to be lots of fun.
Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? Family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Looking for a nightcap to fill your listening needs? Come join us on Spaced Out Radio with me, Dave Scott, right here on Revolution Radio. Monday through Friday for 3 hours a night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, we will take you down the supernatural path. From ET contact to the paranormal and all of the spiritual, cryptid, and conspiracy stories in between. You can find us right here on Revolution Radio, at spacedoutradio.com, on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show. Spaced Out Radio. It's a night of talk and interaction. Are you experienced?
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Welcome back, everybody. Janet. Yeah, Janet started, and I'm here with you with our famous producer, Ahmed Painter, and Janet Carroll Lessin today, as usual, with our Ascension Center on Tuesday nights. Thank you for joining us, everybody, on Studio B. We are the #1 listening supported radio station in the world, as far as we know. And we would like to let you know that you can support us even further. As you heard, all the little radios, guess you would call them infomercials, here on the break. We have some really interesting shows, just like ours tonight. We have Cosmos Connection, Saturday, 6 to 8 on Studio Bay with yours truly, Theresa J. Morris, also known as TJ Morris. And again, Ahmed Painter and Janet Carroll Lessin. That's Cosmos Connection Saturday. So please join us. Ahmed Painter, would you like to talk about your two? Because we could sure use some support on the Mad Look at Reality, I believe. I can always forget the other one. So you do me the honors, please.
It's Mad Look at Reality on Sundays from 11 to 3. 11 a.m. to 3 p.m.
All right, 11 to 3 on Sundays.
Then
Mondays, go ahead.
Open Canvas, it is on Mondays at 10.
10 p.m.?
Yes, ma'am, 10 p.m. at night, Eastern Standard Time.
All right, and we can all have to put in 5, 10, 15, 25, 50, 75, 100, whatever you're willing to help us with. And we just started a new campaign. What's the campaign? Is it like 3,000 or almost that, Ahmed?
It's 2,500, I believe. I can't see it at the moment. I'm in the chat room.
You can't either, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm not.
It's not in the new chat room yet. It's not on.
All righty. But they can still go to a support us button, can they not?
Oh, yeah. They just www.freedomslips.com and hit the support button.
All right. Well, we got that out of the way.
Chat room, which doesn't have it in there yet because we're swapping chat rooms.
That's right, folks. We're going to a PHP, I think, People Helping People bulletin board. So just bear with us. We're going through some changes, but we still have Studio A and B and Nighthawks And we're here, and we are excited to get to talk to people about many people, places, and things here are in the space that we call home. So Cosmos Connection Saturdays. Janet Carroll Lessin, would you like to talk about your Sacred Matrix?
Sacred Matrix is Sundays from 8 to 10 Eastern. This coming Sunday, we have Chris Hardy. And, we like to bring all these people and talk about other worlds and other beings and how that influences life here on Earth. So we're excited about that. Of course, Tuesday is the Ascension Center, which we are on right now from 10 p.m. till 12 midnight. And Saturday is Cosmos Connection. You want to tell us about Cosmos Connection?
It's getting a lot of play tonight, I tell you, folks. Yeah, Janet Carroll Lessin is one of our famous people of Maui, Hawaii, and she likes to book people to interview them, and so she found Ira Hester. Is that the proper way to say it for tonight or Tuesday? Hester. All right. And she's just really good at that. We'll talk about something, and then she'll go find somebody for the next week to follow up what we just talked about, which, last week we talked about the 25 ways to make longevity happen, and we're talking about the soul. And we're fixing to get going now in the second half. Now, Janet, the nervous system is important, and we all need one to stay alive. So, Ira, can you hear us now?
Yep, I can hear you fine.
I had to poke my answer to open it up. Oh, there's some background noise.
I hear somebody talking. Not me. It must be with
Not me. I'm gonna mute while Ira talks. Go ahead.
Oops.
Oh, that was our producer talking. Was that you? All right, no problem. All right. Well, now, Ira, say your name and how we might find you first, since this is starting the second half. Give us your complete name, any books, any websites, how people might find you if they want to get you on their radio shows.
Sure. I'm Ira Pastor. I'm the CEO of BioQuark Incorporated, and our website, www.bioquark.com. You can come there anytime and learn about our strategy and our focus, our research programs we have going on, and reach out. I like talking to everybody. I'm easy to get myself, so any questions, please. I'm passionate about what we're doing, and do not hesitate to send questions or comments or thoughts in our direction.
Great. Now, I would like to know, I've died, but nobody's ever been able to give me a lot of answers in 3D reality. And I lost my voice when they cut my throat open and moved my vocal cords over and grabbed some bad parts and put some other parts in and all that, but that's not when I died. But I did tell them that I had died a couple of times before, and what they did in Louisville, Kentucky was put a little thing on a strip on my head when they took me under, and I felt a lot of pain when something burning put me under. And when I came out, because it cut me in two in my back, I'd never been in so much pain, and I'd had 3 children natural through Lamaze technique. I came in. I died on my 4th daughter. I had bled out with placenta previa. So I knew pain. I knew death. I knew how to leave my body. But since I was getting cut on my neck and my back, but I told them, look, I'm one of these people that leaves their body and probably don't want to come back. But in the meantime, try not to take me down too low. Well, they didn't. And when I came back out, they gave me as much morphine as they could, according to the nurses. Heard that in my own voice when I was on the stretcher coming back. And I'm not a crier, and I have a high tolerance for pain. And I was just apparently my daughter started crying, one of them, just please give her something. So they gave me some Demerol and stuff, but I never got rid of that pain threshold. So I'm thinking that I will never tell them that I died again, okay, because apparently my nervous system, which I hope we're going to talk about, remembered. So can you help us with where's the pain? What is this nervous system thing? And I don't mind being out of my body, but when I came back, I had a mission here for the Ascension age and to get on with, the next level of bringing our entire consciousness up a few notches. And I get to work with people that aren't necessarily in this physical reality because I know how to come and go. Can you help me out here? Because I'm like everybody. They tell me I'll know when I need to know. So any help is very helpful about this. What's going on with our nervous system, and why do we feel pain?
Well, the nervous system is a fascinating place. It is clearly in terms of biomedical science, it is a great sort of last frontier. We know and I'm speaking for the whole neurology community now and neurointensive community, we know almost nothing about the central nervous system. We have a lot of sort of observational understanding, but when it comes to how those 100 billion neurons inside your skull and the trillions of connections give rise to consciousness, memory, mind, soul, who you are, it is, we're still at a kindergarten phase. But this is something that we as an organization, specifically when it comes to the issues of the disorders of consciousness, death being obviously the end of that continuum, but it is an area that we have felt, because it's gotten so little attention and research dollars over the years, is an important area of exploration at the same level of cancer and Alzheimer's and diabetes. And I'll give you a little background to sort of what we've been up to and why. A couple of years ago, we created a project known as Reanima, whose main purpose was to focus on exploratory research in the area of brain death. Now, let's just define brain death for a moment as for the audience. The 65 million of us will leave this place every year. Whether it's the 100,000 a day that we lose due to aging or the 50,000 that we lose due to trauma, the last state that all of us transition through on our way elsewhere is known as brain death, also defined as irreversible coma, defined as such by a group of specialists back in 1968 at Harvard Medical School. However, we sitting here as people interested in regenerative biology decided that there was too much information in the scientific arena to not question why in the year 2017 we are not taking a new look at the problem. First of all, as mentioned at the very beginning, there are many organisms on this planet who can repair, regenerate, and remodel significant portions of their brain, even after critical life-threatening trauma. Some species whose brains you can cut out entirely and throw away, like certain planarian worms, and the brain regrows in its entirety. We see this dynamic in worms. We see it in certain fish, certain amphibians. We also see it in metamorphic insects when the caterpillar becomes a butterfly. We see it in hibernating animals who go to sleep for several months and lose 85% of their brain mass. So the brain, although we think of it as sort of, we have it, if we damage it, it's gone. But no, in nature, there are many examples of how the brain comes back, and it comes back in both structure and function in a quite robust manner. Simultaneously, despite the irreversibility label that was placed on death and brain death in 1968 at Harvard, over the past few decades, there have been dozens of reported cases in the literature in very young subjects who most likely retain some type of neurogenic activity in their brain following birth. And although these cases are controversial, They're hotly debated, and they have resulted, unfortunately, in poor prognoses or outcomes. We believe they show that things are not always black or white with regard to how we need to look at death in the year 2017. And so basically, we wanted to merge this understanding with a third factor. And that third factor is that for the last few decades, there has been an area of research occurring in the United States, quite quietly, but it does occur, and it might not be sexy or interesting to Senny. But living cadaver research has gone on in the United States and many other countries for decades now. What is living cadaver research? It is basically using a subject who has donated their body to science for medical study in a living fashion. So basically the heart and the lungs are kept alive. And we have to remember that when we die of brain death, everything below the brain is still functional. This is sort of one of the things that adds insult to injury upon death, and how it's really that one connection between the upper spinal cord and the lower brain stem that disconnects us from this reality and sends us on to the next. So we wanted to look at this with a 2017 mindset, that we have technologies for regeneration, we have new technologies to understand what's going on in the brain, and we have the living cadaver research system available to us. And this is a new program. It is just getting started. But we feel while human reanimation is not going to happen tomorrow, it's coming. And while something like aging and age reversal may have hundreds of potential targets that one has to focus on before we get the aging component correct, death is one cause. At the end of the day, we all die because our central nervous system goes quiet. And if we can reconnect it and we can spark life in terms of new neurogenesis and new neurogenic structure in the higher central nervous system, we have the ability for the first time ever to begin to blur the lines of what it means to be dead and what it means to be alive. And this, while it is death is a morose topic, it is something that, we need to understand. There's a wonderful quote, I study death because I love life. And we believe that it is a legitimate area of scientific endeavor, and it is one of the things that we are pursuing, not just for the reversal of death potentially, but for the wider class of disorders of consciousness, whether that is coma or persistent vegetative state or any of the traumatic brain injuries that occur, and on through the trickle down to degenerative disorders, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and so forth. There will be a tremendous amount of possibilities that come out of this type of research, and why we are, among other things, focused on solving this part of the puzzle as well. Now, obviously, many questions come into play. One of these that always pops up, and it has to do, of course, with what about the human mind? If you restore someone's brain, will it still contain memories, thought processes, personality, behavior, and so forth of the being? And this is something that people have philosophized and debated for thousands of years. And we believe, and this is why we're so excited, and it's really one of the topics we wanted to talk about tonight, why we are so equally excited, not just with the regeneration part of this process, but about the answers that we may be able to begin to understand through such work. Half of the world of sort of the neuroscience community believes that we are nothing more than the few pounds of stuff, the goo inside our skull. They follow this, what is known as this connectome-centric model that says at the end of the day, we are nothing more than the stuff inside our skull. It's a comforting position to many people. And there's probably, I would say, an even split between this position and the one that says that we're much more than this. The other side believes that the brain is necessary, but not sufficient. The brain is a part of a much more complex process of the mind, involving relating to things, the rest of your body and its electrochemical complexity, its immediate environment, its social networks, and that Janet Lessin's brain, sitting somewhere miraculously kept alive in a tank of fluid somewhere, is not Janet Lessin. You are much more than that. And so, we are placing our bets that memory and the mind are a much more recoverable commodity than many people believe.
I have a friend who froze his, his head. Yeah, he died, and that was about 4 years ago. So what do they do with that? I guess he paid into a fund, and they'll keep his brain or his head frozen until something happens.
Yeah,
do you know anything about that process?
I know a small extent about the cryonics industry and some of the players that are involved there. I don't. I'm not an expert in cryobiology, and I know that they're making tremendous strides in terms of we've moved from freezing, which yields tremendous damage in terms of ice crystals and what happens when ice melts, to sort of this process of vitrification or turning the body to glass. What I can say is that we are approaching the problem slightly differently. We do not want to wait for 500 years to solve the problem. So sort of the cryonics model says, yes, we'll freeze you now, and some really smart people 500 years from now will figure out what to do with you. We want to work on the problems today, because if we can work on this main problem today, which we can, and we are, all of the other issues will fall into place. So we think probably a better alternative, and I can't speak about headless versus it's not, but a better alternative is more of a suspended animation type technology, and there's science going on with regard to sort of cryptobiosis, basically figuring out how to hibernate like a bear for months at a time while some problems are worked on. And this also goes into the whole area of how you keep an astronaut healthy and functional on a long journey into space and what have you. But I think more of the answers are going to be found in the hibernation technologies that are coming down the line, and how we can integrate those with central nervous system regeneration and reanimation research. And I think we'll have very good solutions in a much shorter period of time than 500 years. And still having to figure out how to unthaw, dethaw somebody. But yes.
Go ahead, and then I'll ask. Go ahead.
No, shoot. Go ahead, because it might feed into some other things.
Okay, well, I was listening to you say that people stay alive, and my husband's mother stayed alive, brain dead, but they kept her body alive 7 years. That was one of the reasons he wanted to go ahead and leave the planet. He didn't want to wind up like his mother, but he just allowed they did punctured one of his lungs, and it filled up with, it sprung a leak, and then it filled up with fluid, and he drowned basically by the end of the night. I was with him when he did, but he was ready to go. He had already gone through a lot here. He came back to this planet to die, and I was part of the process. So it's agreement with my government contract, blah, blah, blah. But the thing is, if we're going to talk about central nervous system, and we are not our bodies and we're not our minds, then what are we? And have you got people like me that you talk to that knows I'm not my body, and I know how to come and go and leave the planet and work with other beings? I mean, because I would imagine the reason I haven't shared a lot of this in my past was because people would think I was totally lunatic. Are people like you more open-minded to people like me?
Well, I feel that I am, because I wouldn't be, I wouldn't have sat around for the last 30 years in sort of a an industry that I'm not allowed to be a out of the box thinker in, and then espouse some of these concepts like I do. No, I'm a major believer in that thing inside our head is, as I said, necessary but not sufficient. I am a much more. I do not believe that there is much inside that skull except for electrochemical processing that's going back and forth, generating electromagnetic fields that are interacting beyond the physical structure of the body. The television, there's no little Kim Kardashian inside of my television set. It comes from elsewhere. There are no little football players inside my TV set. That's not the way the system works. There's no concert going on inside my radio. So to think of the brain as that few pounds of goo, which is an amazing organ, but we need to think beyond the just the structure as to what the real possibilities are. And let's delve into some of these, because this is where things get really interesting. There are many, as we spoke about cancer earlier and all of the weird situations where cancer cannot be explained by the existing model. There are many situations that exist that the connectome model, so the concept that we are just inside our skull, can explain. Let me go through these. We listed some of them on the website. The first is just the intrinsic capability of organisms that can regenerate their brains following complete destruction to remember things that they learned beforehand. And that includes those little worms that you teach to do something and you chop off their brain and the head regrows with a whole new brain and they remember things. And we see this in worms, we see it in salamanders, we see it in a variety of experiments. And these experiments go back decades too. It's something that we've never really focused on. We know the dynamic exists. Where does it go? How do they remember? There's two possibilities. One, the memories are elsewhere. They're not anywhere in the organism. Or two, and we'll touch on this a couple points later, is that there's the whole area of non-central nervous system information storage and processing that we're just beginning to learn about. So that's one point. The second is the general concept of the brain turnover and remodeling that occurs in a lifetime. And this goes back to some of what you mentioned about pain and remodeling of the brain. We think of our brain as this thing we have. It doesn't change. It doesn't regenerate. And that's that. This is the furthest from the truth. It is estimated that hundreds of thousands of brain cells inside our skull die every day, and that the milieu within those neurons cycles thousands of times in a lifetime. Despite all of that, and the fact that the brain we start this life with is very different than the brain we have decades later, we somehow hold on to extensive amounts of information that from the very earliest days of our existence. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Thirdly, you have a wide range of well-documented phenomena that the model of the connectome does not address at all. Here's a few of them. Terminal lucidity in Alzheimer's patients. The fact that someone whose brain is ravaged by Alzheimer's for 30 years and doesn't remember their own name can somehow become completely lucid at the end of their life. Makes no sense. You have the situation of gain in function following destruction. So in the case of the induced savant syndromes, which there's dozens of documented cases. Listeners are familiar, of course, with the movie Rain Man, but the fact that one can learn a new function instantly, play the piano, sing a song, knowledge after a destruction event is one example of this. Then you have these bizarre situations of children that are born without a cortex, known as hydroencephalic children. The cortex is supposed to be where we have our consciousness and our mind and our thoughts. How do these children show anything? But they do. They show all of the correlates of consciousness, even though the higher brain doesn't exist. And then lastly, you have the phenomena, as we get a little more esoteric, of all of the situations where the mind somehow knows things it never could have learned. And if one just goes to the Center for Perceptual Studies at University of Virginia and looks at those 2,500 children that somehow know things about World War I fighter pilots and great-grandparents that they no way have ever had interaction with, that were dead decades before they were even conceived. These are questions that we have no answers for with the current model.
So can some of this be in the DNA? So when you're born, you have the memory, you have your ancestors' DNA, you have their memories as well?
There is a theory of genetic memory. I don't think it's a memory as much as it is the resonance of the DNA. So just like our brain generates electrochemical and electromagnetic fields that resonate, this is true for our entire bodies. So this is sort of the one point I mentioned at the beginning. There's the entire area of non-CNS information processing that we just don't think of. There are many organisms on this planet that don't have brains. They don't have them. We as embryos, for the first 8 weeks of our lives, don't have a brain. However, we process information. We also have non-neural tissues in our bodies right now as we're sitting here. Heart, bones, pancreas, even schools of sperm as they communicate to seek out an egg, all communicate electrochemically. And lastly, as I mentioned earlier on in the hour, we have single-cell organisms that like to get together and agglomerate to form structures with other organisms. None of these structures and organisms have nerves or brains or neural impulses. We forget that as wonderful as the nervous system is, it came much later in evolution. And so we sit back and we have to think, okay, we are neural, but at the same time, we have all of these systems that communicate with the same electromagnetic and electrochemical information without neurons and without the brain. So what is going on? I don't believe it is as much a memory within the genes as it is you have a structure that is electric, it is magnetic, it is electric at the DNA level, it's electric at the cellular level, it's electric at the tissue and the organ level. And the whole area of bioelectricity and biomagnetic science is at the forefront nowadays. I mean, Tufts has a major program in this area. But we are these electrical, magnetic, resonating organisms. What are we resonating with? That's the big question. In my opinion, we're out there. There's nothing in here. But we are a complex system that, in its function and its complexity, you have the emergence of the mind from the system. You have emergence of the memory, of the past, of the future, of the present. Now, whether that's going out and resonating with space-time, these are the deeper questions that we will only know the answers to once we finally peer through the window of the recently deceased. But this is how we feel many of the answers are ultimately going to come. And they're going to come a lot sooner than we probably realize.
Well, where would I go to offer my connection to those, like you said, if we're out there, rather than on something Janet and I are creating called the Ascension Center with her meow meow cat. That's her cat. Meow. Cat wants to know, as well as I do. I need to know what to do with this information because, it's, Janet wants me to go share my memories with people at a UFO convention because she feels like I'll fit in there. Personally, I feel it's more of a soul thing that's meant to do more than that. So I want to offer something that needs to be recorded, and I want my legacy to be that these beings that come and go from this planet have always done this. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, they let some of us, and the government knows this, so they wouldn't have put me in the government if they thought I was crazy. They wouldn't have given me a polygraph, an intelligence test, lie detector test, all those things, polygraphs and retina scans and psychological evals, if they didn't believe in me. But what am I supposed to do with this? I mean, I've died, I've talked to people, but, I come back and I'm still here. I've talked to extraterrestrials. They talk to me. I've seen them stand right next to them, not move their mouth, and nobody cares. So, what do you do with this stuff? You live it. You remember you remember your memories from other places and with other spaces. And I know how to dream, and I know lucid dreaming. I know the difference. But, these people, they're not, for some reason, the people I work with off planet, let's say, in another complete galaxy. When I started in Hawaii giving lessons that Graham Hancock asked if I'd be willing to teach again, the government came in the black suits and were going, no, don't be telling these people. And I'm like, why? So, they transferred me from Hawaii to the mainland. So, is there a clue? Do you work with people like me, or what do you suggest?
I have been a big proponent. You have this small but evolving group of post-materialists, scientists that are clearly on our side of the debate. And the names Rupert Sheldrake and Gary Schwartz and at least Jane Miller and so forth.
But they've got a closed group. You know that. Right. They only speak within themselves. I've already been there, done that. So give me another suggestion. Any name you can imagine, I probably talked to already.
Sure. No,
it helps their agenda.
Yeah.
If you're not helping their agenda, then you're not welcome. I'm sorry, that's just the way the world is. But anyway, but I'd love to hear your suggestion.
That's true, and I don't know if I have a great suggestion other, yes, I agree. I have also tried to make some inroads there, and it is not as easy as you would want to believe. As I said, our focus has been on allowing for our breakthroughs to help us elucidate the problem, because while there are, in my opinion, limits to the amount of ESP type experiments that one can do or telekinetic type stuff, there is something sort of tangible to working with the recently deceased and being able to, as our hope, to peer through the curtain and finally answer the questions of what happens. And I'm not talking about clinical death. Obviously, people come back from clinical death all the time. But that's not the question. We want to know what happens when people come back from the real frontier. And that has been...
What are you finding? What are you finding?
So far, what we're finding is... well, we're not there yet, but what we are finding is the possibilities to blur irreversible coma and deep coma, which is the barrier, is going to happen a lot sooner than the world realizes. We are on that precipice, and we are seeing initial positive signs that the protocol that we have put together in terms of neuro and vascular genesis in that specific area of the brain is going to come to fruition much sooner than many other biomedical activities, whether that's curing cancer or what have you. So it's exciting. But we won't have the answers yet. What we will have done at that point is proven that one can transition between death and deep coma. We still then would need to pull somebody out of the continuum to a full state of wakefulness. Then we can answer questions. And the questions that we will be able to answer at that point, we feel will really rock the boat.
So you said that you were going to address, let's see, where do we go when we die? Let's see, it was on your writings here. Where did I see that? What do you learn about? Where does the soul go when we die? Is there a soul? What is the soul? Okay, here it is. You're looking to put clarity on the question about exactly what a soul may be and where it goes after death.
We are hoping to elucidate that as well. Okay. The question is, if we are more, as we suppose, than just that stuff that is sitting inside the skull, and that electrical communication, electrochemical and electromagnetic communication exists as we know it does, not just in the central nervous system, but in the peripheral nervous system and all other parts of our bodies. And as we have seen, that communication hierarchy descends as far down as the genes, up through the cells, the organs, and as we know, through all the scientific literature, is affected by gravitational waves, is affected by the Earth's magnetic fields, is affected by the solar flares of the sun, is affected by time itself and the whole area of chronobiology. It's all connected. There is an integrated hierarchy, and this is one of the things that has been completely ignored by the medical establishment, as mentioned at the very beginning of the show. All of it is connected. All of it is just information. But we are something more than just the structure that holds that information processing. I firmly believe that, even as someone who comes out of this heavily reductionist perspective. I am purely in the post-reductionist camp. Does that mean that electrochemical being latches on to some component of space-time? I don't know the answers to those questions, but I'm willing to explore them, and I'm willing to answer those questions via the tools that we have available to us now. And I think the tools that we have available to us now, not just on the biologic front, but on this, as mentioned, remerging of the physical tools that we threw out 100 years ago, whether that's bioelectricity or biomagnetism, are going to be the sort of integrated set of technologies and protocols that we need to answer the questions. Yes, I believe, even though, from a spiritual perspective, absolutely, I believe we go on. But from a scientific perspective, I also believe we go on. And this is is a vessel that holds a system that resonates with the greater system of space-time and realities that are out there. Remember, we only, as humans in this vessel today, in this organic system, have access to a very small percentage of, even the electromagnetic spectrum as we sit here and look around. There's species that see ultraviolet, there's species that see infrared, there's species that navigate via magnetic fields. There's much more out there that we are privy to. And we feel that the reintegration of these tools will really finally allow us to answer many questions that have just sort of been off limits.
Mm-hmm. TJ, you have a question? Or Matt? TJ, you there? Hello? Matt, are you there?
I'm here.
Oh, you guys?
I think it's showing her still here, but I think she might have dropped.
Oh, no, it looks
like she dropped off on my side. I thought I heard somebody dropping off. It's not showing on my end.
Let's see if I can get her back.
Okay. Alrighty. So while we're waiting for TJ, what was I going to say? Oh, are you? Have you taken into consideration the research by people like Dr. Raymond Moody? There's another organization called the Dr. Michael Moody Institute, where they're doing their progressions of full. Hi, back. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It was rude. They cut me off. Somebody cut me off. Okay, I'm back.
They cut you off. Anyway, what I was asking is, are you familiar with the research and people have written books about, people that have died or come back, or people that are there at the moment of death and they see interdimensional portals opening, and sometimes people have experienced going with their beloved that died. They're kind of taken astrally, and then they get to the precipice, and they say, "No, you can't come. You're not supposed to die. So go back." Have you heard about those stories, and how does that work in conjunction with your research?
Yeah, I think. Well, one, from the angle of the sort of the near-death experience, yeah, absolutely, because just from a structural scientific perspective, those experiences are in many ways unexplainable by the existing system. I mean, people might say, "Oh, it's just this flash of neurotransmitters or whatnot," but no. I mean, there's so many of them that have been reported, and they're so similar that one cannot ignore them. And yes, I think they, in a continuum of this type of work, they're extremely important. And once again, there's always the question with regard to where that is happening and how far towards sort of the, because we have these different definitions of death, how far between the clinical death and then the ultimate brain death continuum those events occur, but it's all still important because many of those events shouldn't exist. I mean, that technically, if the cortex is going dark because of a major infection or trauma, you shouldn't have those experiences anyway. So they clearly point that there is something much deeper going on, and as I said, it's one of those areas that, wants to get swept under the rug by the materialists, but no, I mean, there's just too much out there, too much evidence, too much history that says this is not just an accident. This happens a lot, and the similarities lead to important conclusions that NDEs are extremely real and have deeper meaning.
Ira, I didn't get to hear you, and I apologize. Somebody in the bigger Ethernet cut me off. I don't know if it was off planet or on, but for whatever reason. Let me ask you this, because I'd love to have you back. I'm so delighted. Janet was so excited last week to make contact with you, and you said you'd be on, that I really feel like you could offer us a wonderful service to humanity by connecting with us. And I can't explain it other than this planet worldly resonance, or you like the word resonating electrically. Is that correct? Is that how I speak to you?
Yeah, I like resonance just because it is the basis for all of our interactions from the macro to the micro. Whether it's at the DNA level or whether it's the language that we speak between us, or the greater system, whether it's the interstellar medium of space. It's all information and electromagnetism, and it's all connected. And so I like using the term resonance because the hierarchies at all levels exist and are integrated, and we cannot ignore.
All right, let me tell you this. You speak a language that I'm very familiar with, and everything that you just said has come out of my mouth, and I could prove it because I've said every word you've said over a period of 5 or 6 years, recorded on my own radio shows on TJMRCT Radio, and probably many times here for Mike on this particular location. So we speak a similar language, but I've never seen you. I don't even know what your name looks like spelled out. I've never seen anything in writing about you. I've only heard of you through last week with me coming up with 25 ways and Janet going to connect to something as we were speaking. I don't know if have you ever talked to Janet before last week, a week ago?
No, unless we were resonating through the ether.
Okay. And has she only gotten in contact with you via email since our within the last week?
Aside from the phone call today, yes, only email.
Yeah.
Okay, this is very important. It's very important, Janet, that you see what's going on and that everybody does, because this is why we're here. This is exactly why we're here, this is what makes the difference, is the fact that we were thinking and we were going forward, which a man can tell you, and people can go back and hear that recording as to how we got here today. However, we would not have met if it wasn't for the energy and electric, whatever you want to call it, that brings people together. And I believe that is one of the most important, significant factors of humanity on this planet to enjoy the other species off planet, is the fact that it means something. You can put it in entertainment because people seem to gravitate to changing the world if they can be entertained with the fact that they may be learning something in their conscious minds. But we are not our conscious minds. I have been below my brain. I've seen myself on the inside as a child. I've been allowed to do some things and to see some things, but I'm not really impressed with the fact that I'm still here. But I am impressed with the fact that I'm still willing to be here, and that I'm still willing to try to communicate when it's so frustrating. So is there a possibility, Ira, is it IRA? Is that your name?
That's my first name.
Okay. I don't know your age or where you were born. I'm glad you speak English, but I would love to get to know you through this platform, model, energy, radio shows. But I'm not... I don't know how to do any of that, and for some reason with the radio, it never matters to me afterwards. So Janet is one of these people that will stay in contact. Is there a possibility we could get you back sometime when I'm not disconnected and I have more? Good. Okay,
Absolutely.
Good. And Janet, I think you did a wonderful job connecting and making this happen. I know that your energy was so high, and this time, I don't know, except that I have a feeling that there's something that we can create, Janet, with Ira and with the other gentleman that seems to resonate with me, that Graham Hancock character that you keep bringing around. So I haven't resonated with
Grant
anyone.
Cameron, you got two different people, Grant Cameron. But what we're talking about, Ira, is consciousness. It's Grant, Grant, but you confuse the name with Graham Hancock. That's
which one do I?
Cameron. We've had Grant Cameron on, and Grant Cameron is talking about consciousness, the evolution of consciousness, and how that's coming about, how we're changing. So, just to summarize from my perspective, I think a lot of this disease comes from the human psyche and the stress we have regarding where we are in time and space and in the continuum of what's going on. All the stressors, potential World War III and, Kim Jong-un blowing us up and having to work, 40 hours a week and another 20 hours a week getting there and back. And, all the stressors are putting us ill at ease, and we're not really having conscious, civilized lives that allow us to have some pleasure and downtime and relax and be able to get into our own regeneration and healing.
So,
well, that's the connection we're creating together.
These are connected. Yes.
That's the creation we're creating together. So people like Ira, you, myself, and whoever else you bring on, Graham Hancock or Grant Cameron, I guess they're both involved because it seems to be my brain thinks they're one and the same. So, folks, I know that it's hard to communicate and that sometimes we don't sound like the normal human that you meet at Walmart while you're bumping into them with your grocery cart, okay? we're hopefully going to start talking about all the levels of existence in the many multi-universes, and that is part of why I believe this radio show was created, so we could get on with what's real and not just what's in our imaginations and in the television set, so to speak. So, Ira, you're brilliant as far as I can tell. Yeah, I was going to ask Ira. Okay, Ira, one more time, where can we get in touch with you for all those people? Are you allowed to do an email, or are you functioning solely?
No, you can... I say you can come to the website. Anyone wants to, you want to contact me directly? Pastor, Pastor at bioquark.com. I'm not one of these ivory tower people that doesn't want to talk to anybody. I'll talk to anybody that is interested in regenerative medicine or spirituality or consciousness or the mind or the soul. I have no problem. So feel free to reach out to me. I love talking about what we're doing. I'm passionate about it, and want to make more people aware of it, because it's in this day, as you just mentioned, of Kim Jong-un and North Korea and terrorism and blah, 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 there is a very exciting and promising future coming on many fronts.
Can you come back Saturday, 6 to 8? I don't have anybody.
I'll be glad to.
Awesome. 6 to 8 Saturday. That's it, folks. 6 to 8. Janet, handle that, please. Love and light, dear. Bye.
I shall. Aloha, love and blessings.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at higher risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Most guys freeze. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows you're screwed.
The blood is filling with adrenaline right now, whether you know it or not. Your heart's beating fast. It's getting a little harder to breathe. The neurobiological system is telling it to run, but your knees are too weak to move.
Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity. But do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Report